May 13, 1940, London. The House of Commons breathes like a living thing, wood and stone warmed by bodies pressed shoulder to shoulder, the air heavy with tobacco smoke and unease. Outside, the city carries the memory of sirens and blackout curtains. Inside, men murmur, shuffle papers, glance toward the green benches where a new prime minister is about to speak. Winston Spencer Churchill rises slowly, compact and unmistakable, a stocky figure in a dark suit, shoulders set, jaw forward. The chamber quiets, not out of reverence, but anticipation. Britain is cornered. Europe is collapsing. And this man, only 3 days into the office, must decide how the nation will face the darkness. Churchill adjusts his notes, though he barely needs them. His voice, when it comes, is roughened by cigars and age, yet it carries. He does not pace. He stands firm, feet planted, eyes fixed ahead. I have nothing to offer but blood, toil, tears, and sweat. The words land with a thud, not as poetry, but as inventory. What will be demanded? What must be paid? There is no flourish, no promise of easy victory. The benches creak as members lean forward. This is not reassurance. This is resolve. Across the channel, German Panzer Division steel columns commanded by generals like Heinz Guderian are already punching through the Ardennes. Belgium is burning. The French line is bending. In Whitehall, maps are being pinned and repinned, red arrows advancing with sickening speed. Churchill knows the reports by heart. He has read them at dawn, glasses perched low, dictating responses between puffs of smoke. He knows the Luftwaffe will come. He knows the Royal Air Force is outnumbered. He knows that the British Expeditionary Force, under Lord Gort, is in peril. Yet here, now, he does not speak of numbers. He speaks of duty. You can hear the scrape of a chair as a backbencher shifts. You can feel the tension as Churchill continues, his cadence steady, deliberate, each sentence built like a parapet. We have before us an ordeal of the most grievous kind. He names the enemy without melodrama. He names the task without evasion. In the gallery, pens move faster. Reporters sense it. This is not merely a speech. It is a signal. Britain will not bargain its way out. It will not blink. Churchill's leadership does not arrive fully formed in this moment. It is forged from years of misjudgment and insight alike, from Gallipoli's disaster to warnings about rearmament ignored in the 1930s. Those experiences sit behind his eyes as he speaks, giving weight to his words. He is not a prophet. He is a witness who has learned to speak plainly when plain speaking is hardest. The chamber listens as he outlines a government of all parties, a coalition stitched together by necessity. He names the machinery of war, army, navy, air force, not as abstractions, but as living institutions that will carry the nation's fate. He does not flatter them. He challenges them. You ask, what is our policy? He says, and answers himself without pause. War. War by sea, land, and air. War against a monstrous tyranny. War to the end. Outside, London streets are subdued. Buses rumble past sandbagged buildings. Shop windows are taped in neat X's. Somewhere along the Thames, anti-aircraft guns are being serviced, their crews wiping grease from their hands. The city does not hear the speech as it happens, but it will soon. Radios across Britain will carry Churchill's voice into kitchens and factories, into barracks and ship's messes. His words will find dock workers and clerks, mothers and mechanics. They will hear the same thing the Commons hears now, not comfort, but clarity. Churchill finishes without applause at first. There is a beat and intake of breath across the room, then the benches erupt. It is not unanimous, but it is decisive. He sits, cheeks flushed, eyes bright. The moment passes, but its effect does not. In the days that follow, as the German advance accelerates and the Channel looms as both barrier and lifeline, this speech will become a compass point. Not because it promised victory, But because it defined the price and accepted it. As the members file out, conversations buzz urgent, clipped. Churchill remains for a moment, conferring with aides, already thinking ahead. There will be more speeches. There will be darker days. For now, he has done the essential thing. He has spoken to the truth of the moment and asked the nation to stand with him in it. The war has found its voice. Churchill does not linger in the Commons. Within hours, he is back in the underground cabinet war rooms, descending the narrow stairwell as the sound of London fades and the war sharpens. Maps cover the walls, France, Belgium, the Low Countries, red pins clustered like wounds. It is late May now, and the situation has deteriorated with alarming speed. The British Expeditionary Force is trapped against the Channel, compressed into a shrinking perimeter around a port few Britons had heard of before this month. Dunkirk. The room smells of damp concrete and ink. Chiefs of staff crowd the table: General Sir Edmund Ironside, Admiral Sir Dudley Pound, Air Chief Marshal Sir Cyril Newall. Their uniforms are immaculate, their faces strained. Churchill listens, chin tucked, fingers drumming lightly on the table. Reports come in fragments. German armor within artillery range, Luftwaffe sorties intensifying, French units disintegrating. The Royal Navy can reach Dunkirk, yes, but the beaches are shallow, exposed. Evacuation under fire would be chaos. Churchill asks questions rapidly, precisely. How many men can be lifted per day? What destroyers are available? What of civilian craft? Someone mentions the Thames barges, fishing boats, pleasure yachts. The idea seems absurd at first: small wooden vessels crossing mined waters under air attack. Churchill does not dismiss it. He leans forward. We must attempt it, he says, not as inspiration but as instruction. Operation Dynamo is authorized. The order moves outward from this cramped room, transforming harbors and marinas into improvised lifelines. Above ground, Britain holds its breath. At Dunkirk, soldiers wait in long, disciplined lines along the beach, rifles slung, boots sinking into sand darkened by oil. Stuka sirens scream as bombs fall, columns of smoke marking where men stood seconds earlier. Yet the line holds. Offshore, Royal Navy destroyers edge closer than doctrine ever intended, scraping hulls, loading men until decks sag with weight. And beyond them, improbably, come the little ships crewed by civilians, who answer a call they barely understand but cannot refuse. Churchill follows every hour. He reads casualty lists. He tracks tonnage and headcounts. Each successful crossing is a reprieve. Each sunk vessel, a blow. In cabinet, voices rise. Lord Halifax argues for exploring terms through Italy, foreseeing what peace might be salvaged before annihilation. The argument is sober, rational, and poisonous. Churchill feels the weight of it. Britain stands alone. The United States is distant. The empire is stretched. To fight on may mean invasion, occupation, ruin. He convenes the war cabinet again. The room tightens. Halifax presses his case. Churchill listens, then responds not with rhetoric, but with consequence. Any negotiation now, he argues, would be conducted under the shadow of defeat, with German troops on French soil and British soldiers captured or dead. Terms would not preserve independence. They would dissolve it. He does not thunder. He states. One by one, the objections falter. The decision crystallizes. Britain will fight on. By early June, the numbers become clear. More than 300,000 men are evacuated, British and French lifted from the edge of catastrophe. It is not a victory. Equipment is abandoned. Europe remains in enemy hands. But an army lives. Churchill knows how fragile this moment is. He understands that myth can be as dangerous as despair. When he speaks to the House of Commons on June 4, 1940, he walks a narrow line between pride and preparation. The chamber is full again. Churchill rises, heavier now with exhaustion, eyes rimmed red. He reports the figures plainly, acknowledges the loss of guns and vehicles. Then his voice hardens. He speaks of defense, of fighting on the beaches, the landing grounds, the fields, the streets. The words gather momentum, not as poetry, but as position. This is not bravado. It is a statement of intent, broadcast beyond the walls of Parliament to every corner of the island. In factories, workers pause by radios. In airfields, pilots listen with helmets on their knees. In coastal towns, people look out at the gray water of the channel and imagine what may come across it. Churchill's language does not soften the prospect. It steels it. He ends without illusion. Britain may be invaded. The empire may be assaulted. But surrender is not an option. When the speech ends, there's no sense of relief, only alignment. Churchill returns to his office knowing the Luftwaffe will test this resolve soon enough. Radar stations along the coast are already reporting increased activity. Fighter Command, under Air Chief Marshal Hugh Dowding, is preparing for the trial to come. The army, reconstituting from Dunkirk survivors, digs in. Britain has drawn a line not on a map, but in its own expectations. Churchill understands the power of words because he understands their limits. Speeches cannot stop bombs. They cannot replace aircraft or conjure allies. But they can fix purpose. In the weeks ahead, as the summer sky darkens with contrails and the fate of the nation rises to meet German bombers at altitude, Britain will remember not the chaos of retreat, but the decision made in a basement room to stand, to endure, and to speak that choice aloud. The decision to fight on is tested almost immediately. By July 1940, the war rises into the air. Along the southern coast, radar masts stand like skeletal sentinels, their operators hunched over cathode ray screens in dim rooms, tracking blips that multiply by the day. Fighter Command scrambles Hurricanes and Spitfires from grass airfields, engines coughing, then roaring as pilots race toward formations of Heinkel bombers and Messerschmitt escorts. This is the Battle of Britain, and Churchill watches it unfold hour by hour. In the cabinet war rooms, the map table becomes a battlefield of its own. Colored markers slide across southern England, pushed by young women of the Women's Auxiliary Air Force, their movements precise, relentless. Churchill stands behind them, hands clasped behind his back, eyes narrowed. He listens to Dowding's reports: aircraft serviceability, pilot fatigue, replacement rates. The margins are thin. Every sortie costs something Britain cannot easily replace. London begins to feel the war in its bones. The Blitz arrives with a sound that becomes familiar, first the distant drone, then the rising wail of sirens, then the thunder of explosions walking through neighborhoods. Streets vanish under rubble. Fires burn unchecked until dawn. In the underground, families huddle on platforms, wrapped in coats, children asleep amid the echo of trains that no longer run. Churchill moves through the city despite security objections, visiting bombed districts, standing amid shattered brick and glass. He removes his hat, nods, offers a word. He is seen. That matters. On August 20th, 1940, Churchill returns to the House of Commons. Fighter Command has just endured its hardest weeks. Pilots are flying multiple sorties a day. Losses mount. The nation needs to understand what is being asked of a few thousand young men fighting far above their heads. Churchill rises and speaks of gratitude, but he does so with precision. Never in the field of human conflict, he says, was so much owed by so many to so few. The phrase travels instantly through newspapers, through mess halls, through airfields where ground crews pause. Grease-stained hands resting on wings, you can see its effect. Pilots tape the words inside lockers. Civilians repeat them in shelters. The sentence does not exaggerate. It concentrates. It gives the struggle a human scale and a moral frame. Churchill does not name himself. He names them. In doing so, he shifts attention from destruction to defense, from fear to obligation. As autumn deepens, the Luftwaffe shifts tactics. Daylight raids give way to night bombing. London burns again and again. Covent Garden, the docks, the East End, St. Paul's Cathedral stands silhouetted against flame, its dome intact amid chaos, an image that circulates like a talisman. Churchill understands the power of symbols. He orders fire crews to prioritize the cathedral, not for vanity, but for continuity. Britain must see itself surviving. In private, the strain shows. Churchill sleeps little, dictating memos at all hours, pacing, then slumping into chairs. He drinks, but not to escape, more as ritual than refuge. His wife, Clementine, urges restraint, warns him of exhaustion and sharp words spoken in fatigue. He listens sometimes. Leadership for Churchill is not serenity. It is persistence under pressure. By October, it becomes clear that Germany has failed to gain air superiority. Operation Sea Lion, the planned invasion, is postponed, then quietly shelved. There is no announcement, no parade. The bombings continue, but the existential threat recedes. Britain has not won the war, but it has survived its most vulnerable season. Churchill marks the moment carefully. He does not claim triumph. He frames it as passage. Britain has crossed a bridge of fire and not collapsed beneath it. His speeches now balance endurance with warning. The war will be long. Sacrifice will continue. But the nation has proven something to itself and to the world. In Washington, President Franklin D. Roosevelt listens closely. The speeches, the defiance, the survival, they shift calculations. Aid increases. Lend-Lease looms. Words spoken in London echo across the Atlantic, altering policy and perception alike. Churchill understands this, crafting his language not only for Britons, but for potential allies who must believe Britain is worth backing. As winter approaches, the fires dim and the nights grow colder. London is scarred, but standing. Churchill looks ahead to 1941 with no illusions and no retreat in his thinking. He has carried the nation through its worst moments, not by promising safety, but by naming danger and refusing to yield to it. His voice, graveled, resolute, has become a constant in the storm, a reminder that leadership is not the absence of fear, but the discipline to face it and speak anyway. Survival brings no rest. As 1941 dawns, Churchill faces a war that has widened beyond Britain's skies and shores. In the cabinet war rooms, the maps now sprawl across continents: North Africa, the Atlantic, the Balkans. Pins multiply. Lines stretch. The war has become global, and with it, the demands on Britain's resources and morale intensify. U-boats stalk the Atlantic lanes with methodical cruelty. Convoys form off Liverpool and Halifax. Columns of merchant ships guarded by corvettes and destroyers, their crews bracing against cold spray and unseen torpedoes. Every sinking is felt at home: lost cargo, lost sailors, lost hope. Churchill reads the reports with grim focus, aware that without food and fuel, Britain's defiance will starve. He presses the Admiralty for innovation, better sonar, more escorts, relentless pressure. The Battle of the Atlantic becomes a war of endurance measured in months and miles. In North Africa, British and Commonwealth forces clash with German and Italian troops across deserts that swallow men and machines alike. Names like Tobruk and El Alamein enter the public vocabulary, places of heat and dust and seesaw fortunes. Victories are partial. Defeats sting. Churchill's frustration grows. He demands action, momentum, proof that Britain can do more than hold. His telegrams are sharp, his expectations explicit. He knows morale depends not only on words, but on results. Then, on December 7, 1941, the war shifts again. News of Pearl Harbor reaches London late in the day. Churchill is dining at Chequers when the message arrives. He understands instantly what it means. The United States is in. The sense of isolation that has haunted Britain since 1940 lifts, not with celebration, but with relief so profound it is almost physical. Churchill later describes sleeping, the sleep of the saved and thankful, knowing the balance of the war has changed. Days later, he crosses the Atlantic, braving submarine-infested waters to meet President Roosevelt. The two men confer in Washington, then at sea, shaping strategy and language alike. Churchill's oratory now extends beyond Parliament. He speaks to Congress, his voice carrying across a chamber that has not yet felt bombardment on its own soil. He frames the war not as Britain's struggle, but as a shared defense of civilization. The words resonate. Alliances are not built on speeches alone, but speeches can cement them. Back home, the war grinds on. In 1942, setbacks accumulate. Singapore falls, a blow to imperial prestige. Rommel advances in North Africa. The Channel coast remains closed. Civilians endure rationing, blackouts, loss. Churchill's approval wavers. Critics whisper that his energy has outpaced his judgment. He senses it. Leadership now requires not only defiance, but patience and ability to absorb disappointment without surrendering direction. He returns again and again to Parliament, to the radio, to the public. His tone shifts subtly. Less thunder, more steadiness. He acknowledges reverses, honors sacrifice, insists on ultimate purpose. He does not promise swift victory. He promises work. In doing so, he recalibrates expectations, keeping the nation aligned with a war that shows no sign of ending soon. Privately, the toll is visible. Churchill's health falters. Pneumonia strikes late in 1943, but even before that, fatigue shadows him. Yet he refuses to withdraw. He travels incessantly to Cairo, Moscow, Casablanca, meeting Stalin, coordinating strategy, arguing for priorities. His presence reassures allies and unsettles adversaries. He uses history as both lesson and warning, reminding his counterparts that wars are lost as often by fracture as by force. By the end of 1942, a turning point finally arrives. At El Alamein, British forces under General Bernard Montgomery halt and then drive back the Axis in North Africa. It is not the end, but it is the first clear, unambiguous victory. Churchill announces it carefully. This is not the end, he tells the nation. It is not even the beginning of the end. But it is, perhaps, the end of the beginning. The phrase captures the moment with surgical accuracy. Hope without illusion. Britain, exhausted but intact, absorbs the news. The war has not been won by speeches. But speeches have carried Britain through years when victory seemed abstract and survival uncertain. Churchill's leadership, forged in crisis, now adapts to coalition, to complexity, to a future where Britain is no longer alone, but still must endure. As the war turns, Churchill's role evolves again. By 1943, Britain is no longer fighting for survival alone, but for position in a victory that must be shaped as well as won. The cabinet war rooms remain active, but now the walls are crowded with plans for offensives rather than defenses. Arrows pushing into Italy, across the Channel, deep into occupied Europe. Churchill studies them with the same intensity he once reserved for invasion warnings, aware that triumph brings its own risks. He travels relentlessly. In Casablanca, Tehran, Yalta, he sits at tables with Roosevelt and Stalin, a cigar between his fingers, pressing Britain's case amid giants. His speeches here are private, strategic, less lyrical, but no less deliberate. He argues for Mediterranean operations, for caution in France, for preserving British influence in a post-war world already taking shape in outlines. He knows words spoken now will echo long after the guns fall silent. At home, the Blitz has ended, but the war's weight persists. Families await news from Italy, from Normandy, from the skies over Germany. When Allied bombers roar overhead at night, their contrails silvered by moonlight, Churchill watches from rooftops and windows, conscious of the destruction being unleashed in Britain's name. Leadership now carries moral complexity. He addresses it obliquely, speaking of necessity and sorrow in the same breath. June 6, 1944 arrives with no public speech beforehand. The invasion of Normandy demands silence. Churchill wants to go to cross the Channel with the fleet, but is overruled. He waits instead, pacing, smoking, receiving reports in clipped phrases. When the landings succeed, he speaks not of glory, but of gratitude to soldiers, sailors, and airmen who carried the weight of decision onto foreign sand. As Allied forces push inland and the Red Army advances from the east, the end draws nearer. Yet Churchill senses the danger of premature celebration. He warns Parliament that the war against Japan continues, that sacrifice is not finished. His rhetoric remains disciplined, resisting the temptation to close the book too early. On May 8, 1945, Victory in Europe Day, Churchill stands again before the nation. London erupts, crowds flood the streets, flags wave, bells ring. He addresses them from the balcony of the Ministry of Health, his voice carried over cheering. He allows himself briefly to share the joy, but even now he tempers it. We may allow ourselves a brief period of rejoicing, he says, but let us not forget the toil and efforts that lie ahead. The war has ended in Europe. The work of peace has not begun cleanly. Weeks later, in a turn that surprises many and wounds him deeply, Churchill's government is voted out in a general election. The man who embodied wartime Britain is set aside for peacetime change. He accepts the result with outward composure, inward pain. His farewell speech in the Commons is restrained, dignified. Leadership, he knows, does not entitle one to permanence, yet his voice does not fade. In 1946, at Fulton, Missouri, he speaks of an iron curtain descending across Europe, shaping the language of a new era. Once again, words frame reality before armies fully mobilize. It is a final testament to the skill that defined his wartime leadership, the ability to see clearly, to speak early, and to compel attention. Looking back, Churchill's extraordinary leadership was never rooted in omniscience or perfection. It lay in his refusal to anesthetize the truth, and in his insistence that courage could be articulated, shared, and sustained through language. In Britain's worst moments, when defeat felt plausible and fear omnipresent, he gave the nation not comfort, but conviction. He understood that words, when chosen carefully and spoken honestly, could hold a people together long enough for material strength to catch up with moral resolve. In that space, between despair and deliverance, Churchill stood, spoke, and helped a nation endure.